Monday, May 2nd, 2005, the police station in the French town of Aigues-Mortes. Around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, an officer answered a call that seemed strange to him, to say the least. On the line was an informant claiming that something terrible might happen to a young woman in a few hours. The informant explained that a couple was sitting at a table on the terrace of the L'Escale bar in Aigues-Mortes, and the police needed to act immediately because her companion was extremely dangerous. The officer who answered the call heard a panicked voice on the other end shout, "The man who just left me is planning to abduct a girl. He's dangerous, and I think he's going to do something terrible." The caller was 63-year-old local resident Dominique Tarasco. Tarasco's voice trembled as he told the police about a conversation he had with a friend earlier that day. His friend was a cruel and dangerous man, and from their conversation, Tarasco deduced that he intended to harm a young girl. The police tried to obtain more information from Dominique, what his friend looked like, his name, who they should be looking for. However, despite his initial willingness to help, Tarasco refused to reveal his friend's name, stating that he feared for his own life. No promise of protection could compel him to disclose the name. However, he did provide the police with the location where his friend was supposed to meet. He said his friend would meet an unsuspecting girl on the terrace of the L'Escale bar. Tarasco also gave the police a description of his friend's car, a green 1994 Seat Ibiza. Time was running out rapidly. If an abduction was planned, the police didn't have time to extract more information from Tarasco. 4 officers got into 2 cars and immediately headed to the bar. They arrived at the establishment around 6:15 p.m. The police turned off their sirens and pretended to be just enjoying themselves at the bar. It was crucial not to spook the suspect. However, they quickly realized that trying to find unknown abductors and the girl was nearly impossible. It was the last evening of a 3-day weekend, and the streets, as well as the bar's terrace, were crowded with couples having a good time. None of the girls appeared frightened. Not knowing whom to look for, 2 officers started scanning for the Seat Ibiza. An hour passed, but the police couldn't find the couple or the car. Detectives began to wonder if Dominique had been mistaken. They called him to clarify the details he had provided. Suddenly, Dominique's heart sank. He realized that he had described the wrong car. In reality, his friend drove a gray 1994 Citroën ZX. The police were incredibly frustrated that they had been searching for the wrong vehicle while the Citroën might have slipped right under their noses, and they wouldn't even have noticed. After another thorough search, they confirmed that they couldn't see the needed car anywhere. The race against time to save the girl came to a forced halt. The police were at a dead end. Since Dominique refused to provide more information, there was nothing they could do. The officers returned to the station and checked if there were any reports of missing local girls, but there were none. Dominique had given the police incomplete and inaccurate information. A logical question arises. Why did they believe him in the first place? Dominique Tarasco was known to the local police. Officially, he was involved in collecting recyclables, but unofficially, he was the owner of an illegal nightclub near Aigues-Mortes. The seemingly simple wooden shed housed a popular establishment frequented by both local celebrities and less reputable individuals. The police wanted to shut down the illegal club, but Tarasco managed to strike a deal with them. He had become a police informant, and in exchange, law enforcement turned a blind eye to his business. Tarasco had already been of great use to the police, providing them with information about impending crimes that had led to several arrests. However, none of these cases had been as serious as a human abduction. 2 days later, a 25-year-old man named Sylvain Rosin walked into the police station in Marseille, 180 kilometers from Aigues-Mortes. Sylvain was extremely worried as he had been unable to contact his wife, Elodie Morel, for 2 days. She had left home to meet with a well-known photographer in Aigues-Mortes. Sylvain explained that 28-year-old Elodie had worked as a waitress in bars and restaurants for most of her life, but she had grown tired of long night shifts, unpredictable working hours, low pay, and difficult customers. Given her interest in the fashion industry and natural beauty, she decided to pursue her long-standing dream of becoming a model. In April 2005, she registered on a website for people aspiring to work in the fashion industry. Elodie applied for any modeling job she could find, and then she came across an incredibly enticing offer. Renowned photographer Nicole Forestier was looking for models to represent Rolls-Royce. The photo shoot was scheduled to last for 5 days, and the 3 selected models would receive €1,000 for each shooting day, with expenses for food, accommodation, and transportation covered. Furthermore, the girls who impressed would travel to the United States as representatives of Rolls-Royce. This was Elodie's dream job, and she understood that her chances were slim with fierce competition ahead. Nevertheless, she submitted her application to participate in the competition. Prepared for rejection, she was overjoyed when Nicole wrote to her, informing her that she had secured the job. The photographer explained that Elodie had precisely the look she was seeking. When Sylvain heard that Elodie had been chosen as one of the 3 models for the photo shoot, her enthusiasm became infectious, although he did wonder if this could be a trap set by people preying on young, attractive girls. The police asked Sylvain why he allowed his wife to meet with the photographer in the first place, and he replied that he trusted his wife, who was an intelligent woman and would not fall for a foolish trick. Moreover, he felt that a meeting with a woman in a public place in the middle of the day couldn't hold any danger. The last message Sylvain received from his wife came on May 2nd at 9:30 p.m., a few hours after her meeting with the photographer. It read, "Kisses. Everything is going fine. I'll call you tomorrow when I can. Kisses and hugs. We'll talk later." While the police spoke with Sylvain, they sensed that he might be hiding something. He tried to evade their questions, but eventually confessed that he and his wife had been arguing frequently recently and had even decided to separate, although they continued living together for the sake of their son. The police believed that the couple's relationship and Elodie's last message suggested that she might have chosen not to contact her husband voluntarily. However, Sylvain insisted that there was no reason for his wife to conceal a new romance, if there was one, and that she would never, ever abandon their son. She had always wanted their son to grow up in a loving family, something she herself had lacked in her childhood. The police had no doubts that there could be a million innocent reasons why the young woman hadn't been in touch with her husband. Perhaps she had no cell phone signal, or she had lost her phone. However, Sylvain insisted that something needed to be done. Finally, the Marseille police relented, compiled a report with Elodie's description and where she was last seen, and sent it to other police stations. The police in Aigues-Mortes continued to investigate missing persons reports, hoping to find any connection to the story Dominique Tarasco had shared 2 days earlier. When a fax arrived from the Marseille police detailing Elodie Morel's disappearance, the detectives couldn't help but feel uneasy. Elodie's last known location was Aigues-Mortes on May 2nd, and she had a meeting with an unknown individual at a bar around 6 p.m. The remarkable similarities between Elodie's disappearance and Dominique's potential abduction report couldn't be ignored. Detectives got in touch with Sylvain to gather more information about his wife. When Sylvain described the details of his wife's meeting with the photographer, they matched exactly what the police already knew from Dominique's account. These were the 2 pieces of the same story. Detectives asked Sylvain to come to the Aigues-Mortes police station and bring photos of his spouse. He also provided a description of his wife's car, the clothes she had taken with her, copies of Elodie's correspondence with Nicole Forestier, and his wife's phone number. Calls to the phone were immediately redirected to voicemail, indicating that the phone was either turned off or malfunctioning. However, the police managed to trace the ping from Elodie's phone and determined her location before her mobile went dead. On May 2nd, her phone was in Aigues-Mortes, confirming that she had safely arrived in the city on that day. Later, she was located in the commune of Saint-Gilles, which is 30 kilometers from Aigues-Mortes. This indicated that Elodie was likely on her way to the photo shoot location. Strangely, the signal then came from Vauvert, which is 19 kilometers in the opposite direction. Shortly after appearing in Vauvert, the ping from Elodie's phone disappeared and never reappeared. The police believed that they couldn't conduct a search in Aigues-Mortes, Saint-Gilles, and Vauvert all at once. The area was too extensive. Only one person could help them now, Dominique Tarasco. They asked him to come to the station. He arrived around 8:30 p.m. and shared a story with the detectives that sent shivers down their spines. It was hard for them to believe. On the evening of May 2nd, after Tarasco had called the police to report a possible abduction, he drove into town to have dinner and distract himself from his thoughts. A few hours later, he was returning home along a country road. In the darkness, he noticed flashing blue and red lights. 2 police cars were blocking the road and several officers were standing nearby. Tarasco assumed that the police were conducting a stakeout on the potential kidnapper. He stopped his car and got out to inquire about the progress of the search for the girl. Although he had not disclosed the name of the potential abductor to the detectives, Tarasco hoped that the police had located the man's car. Meanwhile, the officers observed an agitated man approaching them, waving his arms and shouting strange questions. When he got closer, they could tell that he was slightly intoxicated. The man was asking whether they had found the car, arrested the suspect, and if the girl was okay, but the police couldn't make sense of his words. They didn't understand what he was talking about because they were simply conducting a routine check on cars passing along that road. While Tarasco was talking to the police, a car slowly approached them. Dominique instantly recognized the vehicle. It was his friend's gray Citroën ZX from 1994. It was his friend's car. As the officers were preoccupied with Dominique, the car drove past the police vehicles and sped away without being stopped. Tarasco noticed his friend in the driver's seat, and a beautiful, long-haired girl was sitting in the passenger seat. She seemed to be leaning against the window as if asleep. Dominique became extremely uneasy. He began demanding that the police chase after the car and arrest the driver, but they were no longer listening to him. Suddenly, the man's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and saw that it was his friend, who had just driven past him. Dominique's heart sank, but he managed to answer the call. As it turned out, his friend hadn't noticed him. Instead, he called to warn Dominique about the police presence near his home, advised him to be careful, and then ended the call. When Tarasco recounted this incredible story at the police station, the investigators were shocked. They found it hard to believe. What were the chances that Tarasco had approached the roadblock and effectively distracted the police just as his friend happened to drive by? And why was he only sharing this information now? Tarasco explained that he was terrified of his friend. With a certain degree of skepticism, the investigators contacted the officers who had been conducting the vehicle check that day and managed to confirm that there had indeed been a roadside check that evening. Someone had called Dominique after the gray Citroën ZX had passed by. Everything Tarasco had said was verified. He was telling the truth. His description of the girl in the car perfectly matched Elodie Morel. There was also no doubt about the identity of the driver of the car, since Tarasco's friend had called him to warn about the police. And their patience had worn thin. They demanded a name. The investigators threatened Tarasco with imprisonment and pressed him to reveal the identity. Unable to withstand the pressure any longer, Tarasco finally gave in. Tearfully, he uttered the name of the abductor, Guillaume Mingaud. Guillaume Mingaud, 49 years old, had a long history of brushes with the law. He was known for hunting young foreign women traveling by car for his vile purposes. After his release from prison, he visited an old acquaintance and asked for a job. This acquaintance turned out to be Dominique Tarasco. Dominique had no desire to employ such a dangerous person, but fearing Mingaud himself, he hired him as a bouncer in his nightclub, where his violent nature could serve some purpose. On May 2nd, Mingaud was at Tarasco's establishment, where he boasted about having a meeting with a beautiful girl on the bar's terrace. However, Guillaume's choice of words unsettled Tarasco. Knowing Mingaud's proclivities, he felt obliged to inform the police about the impending encounter between a dangerous repeat offender and an unsuspecting girl. Learning of Mingaud's criminal history, the police immediately classified him as the prime suspect. However, the case was still based on Tarasco's vague statements and could be dismissed as a series of unlikely coincidences. Detectives needed evidence of Elodie's abduction by Guillaume Mingaud. They questioned the bar staff, who confirmed that Mingaud was a regular customer and had arrived with a beautiful girl that day. It became increasingly evident that Elodie Morel was in the hands of a very dangerous individual capable of anything. Yet, the detectives had no idea where to find the suspect. Mingaud had traveled extensively, often staying with acquaintances or spending nights in nightclubs. He could be anywhere. Therefore, they set up a trap to lure him. Detectives forced Dominique to call Mingaud and arrange a meeting. Mingaud told Dominique that he would be at a nightclub in Montpellier, a 30-minute drive from Aigues-Mortes. The club was familiar to Mingaud as he had once worked there as a bouncer. Officers positioned themselves in the club's parking lot and waited. The plan worked. A white van pulled up, and to the police's surprise, Guillaume Mingaud was indeed in the passenger seat. An unknown middle-aged man was driving, but was Elodie inside? Mingaud got out of the car and the police immediately moved to apprehend the suspect. The man tried to flee, but they quickly brought him down and arrested him. The driver of the van didn't resist. He introduced himself as Richard Lignier, a nearby resident and construction worker. He had never had any legal troubles and simply wanted to spend a pleasant evening with his acquaintance. The police searched the van, but it turned out to be empty. Elodie was not inside. Mingaud's belongings were also searched. In his pockets, they found a phone, car keys, and a wallet. Inside the wallet were some documents, a small amount of money, and a bank card in Elodie Morel's name. However, the man had a ready explanation. He claimed he had found the card on the bar's terrace 2 days ago and intended to return it to the bank the following day, but forgot to do so. As for Lignier, he explained that he lived in the commune of Vergese with his wife and teenage daughter. Mingaud had been his friend, and for the past 2 days he had been staying at his house. Mingaud allegedly often stayed with Lignier during his travels before setting out again. The detectives had a hard time believing the two men's stories. Mingaud's explanation about Elodie's bank card seemed far-fetched, and Lignier lived only 8 kilometers from Vouvray, where the last ping from Elodie's mobile phone had been recorded. The police arrested both men and took them to the station for questioning. However, they made a stop on the way, visiting Richard Lignier's home. When the officers arrived at Lignier's house, they encountered the most bizarre and surreal scene of their careers. Richard's wife, Francine Lignier, and their daughter were seated at the table, having lunch. Neither Francine nor the girl reacted to the uninvited guests at all. They continued to eat in silence, as if a group of police officers had not just burst into their home and started searching the premises. This strange reaction left the detectives astounded, as if they had been expected. An unpleasant and oppressive atmosphere pervaded the family's home. Despite this eerie atmosphere, the police meticulously searched the house while the women continued their meal. Elodie herself was nowhere to be found, but indirect evidence of her presence emerged. A black handbag, a floral dress, 2 pairs of high-heeled shoes, and a black sweater. These were the items Elodie had taken with her on her trip. However, the most crucial piece of evidence was Elodie's phone, which was now in the possession of Lignier's daughter. After making these findings, the police decided to take the mother and daughter to the station for further questioning. Interrogating Mingaud proved to be incredibly challenging. He was a master of manipulation and stuck to his story. The police could contradict some of his statements thanks to the evidence they had found, but Mingaud insisted that he had simply found the bank card and intended to return it. Period. So the investigators decided to focus more on the Lignier family. They reasoned that it would be easier to get Richard, who had never been in trouble with the law before, to talk than the repeat offender Guillaume Mingaud. With each passing hour of questioning, Richard became more exhausted, and the investigators were confident that he was on the verge of revealing everything. As expected, Richard eventually broke down. He confessed that Guillaume Mingaud had shown up at his house at 6 a.m. on May 3rd while his family was having breakfast. Mingaud claimed to have come with a girl and needed somewhere to hide her. Just a few meters from Richard's house, there was an isolated place, a garage. Richard had no choice but to unlock it and allow Mingaud to drive into the garage. "I didn't see what was in the trunk. I didn't hear anything." Mingaud said he would stay overnight in the garage to make sure she wouldn't scream. Richard asked no further questions, returned to the house, washed up, got dressed, and went to work as usual. But it wasn't an ordinary day. There was a young woman in his garage who could be in great danger. Richard was well aware of how cruel and dangerous Mingaud could be, but not once throughout the entire day did he feel the need to contact the police and report what was happening in his garage. After Richard's confession, his wife Francine fully corroborated his account. However, like her husband, she never considered calling the police to report the girl in her garage. She was afraid that by doing so, Mingaud would harm her daughter. She added that on the evening of the same day, May 3rd, Mingaud entered their house, demanding dinner. He had with him a black bag, a dress, 2 pairs of high-heeled shoes, a sweater, and a phone. He handed the items to Richard and Francine as a gift. Francine took the items without asking questions, while she gave the phone to their daughter, as she happened to need a new one. During lunch, Mingaud first mentioned that the girl might report him to the police, and hinted at his terrible intentions toward her. Upon learning that Lignier had revealed everything to the police, Guillaume Mingaud lost confidence in himself and came up with a new version of events. He admitted to posting a fake message online about upcoming photo shoots for Rolls-Royce. He had posed as the renowned photographer Nicole Forestier and provided enough information to make the photo shoot appear credible. Mingaud claimed to be genuinely surprised when Elodie responded to the offer and accused her of falling for an offer that was too good to be true. Regardless, Mingaud contacted Elodie by phone, introduced himself as Forestier's assistant Alain Lacoste, and invited her to Aigues-Mortes ostensibly to meet Forestier before the shoot began. After meeting Elodie, he proposed going on a trip to the locations where the photo shoot was planned. She agreed and messaged her husband, assuring him that everything was fine. As he had done in the past, Mingaud drove Elodie onto a country road. Sensing that they had gone far enough, he attacked her. However, he told the police that all he needed was her bank card and PIN. He claimed that he simply let her go afterward, using her card to make some purchases, refuel his car, and withdraw some cash. This was confirmed by the ATM camera. Mingaud denied Lignier's claims about the garage and other things. Of course, no one believed that Mingaud had lured Elodie to Aigues-Mortes just to steal her bank card. While interrogating him, investigators searched Lignier's garage and found several dozen cigarette butts, fingerprints, and DNA evidence from both Guillaume and Elodie. These pieces of evidence confirmed that Elodie had been in the garage with Mingaud. Confronted with these facts, Mingaud provided yet another version of what happened. He once again claimed that he only needed Elodie's bank card. Supposedly, he did take her to the garage, but it was only to buy some time. He wanted to discuss a plan with Elodie. He would keep her bank card in exchange for her silence. Mingaud stated that he was almost ready to release her when she suddenly pushed him. He justified the subsequent violence with his explosive temper. The end of the first week of May was supposed to be the grand finale of the photo shoot for Rolls-Royce. Instead, on May 6th, Mingaud was wrapping up his statements about what had occurred. He revealed where he had left Elodie. The police found her black 1995 BMW sedan in the Aigues-Mortes parking lot. The license plates confirmed that it was her car. When detectives opened the trunk, they found Elodie there. She had died from asphyxiation. During the autopsy, more horrifying details of what had happened to Elodie during the harrowing 36 hours she spent in the clutches of her captor, with no one coming to her aid, were uncovered. There's no need to enumerate these details, as one can easily imagine what a criminal of this nature could do to an attractive young woman who had fallen into his trap. Guillaume Mingaud, Richard, and Francine Lignier faced trial in January 2008. During the trial, Mingaud once again mocked the feelings of all Elodie's friends and family. Despite all the evidence gathered and his own confession, he claimed that everything was Richard Lignier's fault and that he had fallen in love with Elodie at first sight, so he allegedly couldn't harm her. No one bought into his lies, and in February 2008, he was sentenced to life imprisonment. He filed an appeal, which was approved. His sentence was reduced to a maximum of 30 years with a minimum of 20 years in prison. Richard and Francine were initially sentenced to 6 years, but their prison terms were increased to 8 years after a year. Sylvain Racine struggled deeply with what happened to his wife and never publicly commented on the case. Elodie's top priority had been to raise her son in a safe and happy home environment, and Sylvain promised himself that he would do everything possible to ensure that. Dominique Tarasco, who first reported the possible kidnapping to the police, understands that his reluctance to reveal Guillaume Mingaud's name hindered the timely rescue of Elodie. He acknowledges that he still regrets not fully cooperating with the police. Dominique believes he could have saved Elodie Morel because he knew enough but didn't act on it. He has never been charged in connection with this case.